Welcome back to Dragon Army Books. My name is Dustin, and today I have a very special guest with me, Daniel Goldman. He's a booktuber, not just a booktuber. You're a kind of a book content creator. I know you're on YouTube, but TikTok is where you spend the majority of your time. Daniel, it's so good to have you here. Welcome. Thank you for joining me for this conversation.
Absolutely. It's a real pleasure. And we have a lot of crossover on our channel. So it's really fun to talk to someone who's pretty like-minded with hopefully some differing opinions as well. But yeah, I started YouTube only quite recently, and I sort of moved across to TikTok to sort of build both brands at the same time. And TikTok ended up being a real hit. So now I really just do both of them. Yeah.
I invited Daniel to my channel to have a conversation about 5-star ratings and reviews. For those of you that don't know, it's been a conversation probably since reviews and ratings started, but especially within the last month or two, because I know that, especially on book Twitter, there was an author who drunkenly tweeted out some of her aggravations and frustrations with 4-star reviews for her books. And of course, she got a lot of pushback on that. And in the middle of all of this, my brother sent me a TikTok video, one of yours, that was talking about 5-star ratings and reviews. And not only did we have some crossover, and I was like, I think we would be friends. It was interesting,
And here
because
we are.
here we are, just a few days later. But you said something in the TikTok, and I guess we'll just start there, that really got my attention. And I'm curious as to if this is a TikTok thing that you were saying, or if this is a real thing, or if there's some kind of middle ground. In that video, you said that you don't give out 5-star reviews lightly. In fact, you only have 5-star reviews in your entire reading career. Is that correct?
That is
and can
correct.
you explain that?
Yes.
Wow.
I can explain that. Yeah. So I think, first of all, everyone's really different. I know a lot of people who have hundreds of 5-star reviews. I tend to reserve those for books that I really feel made an impact on me. So I've got many 4.5-star reviews, but I don't have a lot of 5-star reviews. I feel like if I gave them out very, very easily, then there'd be a little bit less weight to them, I guess you would say. So yeah, I try to reserve that for a book that I really enjoyed.
And I do too. I give out a good amount of 4 and 4.5. I do reserve my 5 stars for the best of the best. And I think everybody does in their mind, but I have got many more than 5. I've got a lot less than 100, but many more than 5. So I'm probably somewhere in the middle there. What are some of you don't have to go through the full list, although 5 is a pretty quick one.
I wrote them down in case I forgot them too.
what are some of those? And then I'll share some of mine.
So in no particular order, and in that video on TikTok, it's exactly the same. So The Final Empire, which is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy. I'm sure you probably are pretty similar on that one, I imagine. I haven't met too many that aren't.
It's my favorite. My favorite Sanderson is
Brilliant
the Mistborn series. And I also gave The Final Empire and maybe The Well of Ascension. I gave 2. I think I gave 2 of the 3 5 stars, and then one of them I gave 4.5, something like that. But great series.
Yeah, it was a little bit different for me. The first book, magnificent, 5 stars without a doubt. And then I think The Well of Ascension didn't quite reach the same heights for me, only because it was a little bit more political, which I often enjoy. It didn't quite grab me in this book, but it was still probably, like you said, a 4.5 star, and really similar for the last book. So, but the whole trilogy for me is just easiest 5-star I'm going to give out. And I don't know if you've read Era 2, but I also loved Era 2. It's a little bit controversial because that one is it's different. It's not quite the same, and people don't love that it's not identical to the first trilogy, but I loved it. I thought it was very funny. Magic was brilliant too.
I love Wax and Wayne. I know the 4th and final one he's working on or just finished, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think I checked his website the other day. I think he's only about 5% into it.
But yeah, that's right.
It might not be the writing stage. I don't quote me on that, but I think there's a ways to go on that one.
Well, if you know anything about Sanderson, 5% into it means he should finish it by next Friday. So
yeah, correct. Let's hope. So we got Final Empire, but I'd really say the whole trilogy, and maybe even all 6 of the 7 books out so far. The Poppy War by Rebecca Kong. That was magnificent. The Lies of Locke Lamora. Addie LaRue, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is by V.E. Schwab, which is a very different type of book to what I would normally read. And it's a very different type of book to to what I would normally have thought would be a 5-star read as well. So it's the most different on my list. And the big boffer, the big dog, is Dune by Frank Herbert. That is just my all-time favorite read. And I said in that video, on the TikTok video, I actually said I could read that probably every year and be the happiest person in the world. And I maintain that. I reckon you get something new from it every time you would read it.
Are you excited about the movie?
Oh my goodness.
It's gonna be good.
Yeah, I really am. They've got like Denis Villeneuve. Villeneuve, I think that's how you pronounce it, or Villeneuve. He's brilliant director. It's got a massive cast. It looks like, well, he was saying in an interview that that's his one of his favorite childhood books and always has been until now. So I think he's really going to do it justice, and he looks like he's got the skills to do it and the cast to execute as well.
I like a lot of those books that you mentioned, loved a few of them. So I've already mentioned, but the Mistborn trilogy, I didn't give every single one of them 5 stars, most certainly did for The Final Empire. I don't know if you've read Red Rising, but that is definitely a 5-star review for me. And a lot of
the book or the series, would you say?
The book in particular, I loved that first book. I know that a lot of people think the series even gets better, and it does, but for me, a lot of the times, the book that gets me into it is, even if it's not the best book in the series, it's typically my favorite. Has a special place in
your heart.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally get it.
A few of the Stormlight Archive books, so that's also Brandon Sanderson. I loved Rhythm of War, which is the newest one, and then Words of Radiance, I think, is top tier. And then Ender's Game. It is a sci-fi classic that got me into literature. I don't think it's the best anymore. I don't think the author's the best necessarily, but because of when it fell in my reading history, it changed my reading trajectory for the rest of my life. So that made it 5 stars too.
Yeah, I totally can respect and appreciate that. And I really, really enjoyed Ender's Game. I loved the concept. I loved the execution. I did not like the movie. I don't know if you've seen the movie. So you've seen it as well. That movie, I think, really did not do it justice. And I think the problem with that, what upsets me about that, and it's the same thing with Ready Player One, is you see these blockbuster movies, like most people don't read, and they don't read fantasy and sci-fi, but they love to watch it. So you know you're going to get a massive audience watching a movie that does not do the books justice. And I would have loved them to execute so much better, because then more people probably want to read the source material as well.
Mine was just a selection. Yours was pretty much all of your 5-star reviews. So I think that leads to the conversation and the question, what makes, in your opinion, what makes a book or a series 5 stars for you?
So there's a few different things, and I wrote them down in case I forget any, but it's such an interesting question, because I know people approach that rating system so differently. For me, a 5-star book is not necessarily a book that was the best book out there. It's a book that resonated with me, something that I'll remember. If I'm talking about or thinking about a book months after reading it, years after reading it, it's probably a 5-star book, particularly if it's for good reasons. So a book that I'm going to recommend to just about everybody, and if I enjoyed it enough, that's going to be a 5-star book. If it's a book that that I'm thinking about, that's a book I'm going to recommend. If it left an impact on my life, I reckon that is one of the biggest keys for me. If I walk away from that book thinking, wow, that really, that got me thinking about my own life and my own situation, and or if I'm thinking, what would I have done if I was that character, or how would I have handled that differently, that is also a really big one. And then sometimes it's just pure joy factor. A perfect example of that for me is in The Lies of Locke Lamora. That is not a 5-star book. It's probably not even close, but I had 5-star fun reading it. I loved every minute of reading that book. In fact, that's not even true. I didn't love the first 100 pages of that book, and I still rated it 5-star because I just had so much fun in the last 450 pages of that story. Yeah, so what about you? What are the things that quantify or qualify for you as 5-star?
Yeah, I agree with you. For me, it's pretty much 95% enjoyment level. Like, the book doesn't have to be the best prose, or it doesn't have to have, it doesn't have to have all the qualities of what makes good literature necessarily. If it was enjoyable for me, if I was enamored in reading it, if I thought about the book when I wasn't reading it, if it was difficult to put down, and then you said one cool thing, if it impacted my life, and there are so few books that do that, but that is one of those qualities that could make it a 5-star review for me. If I feel something after finishing it, either a lot of times I'll feel this loss or emptiness, like what am I going to do with my life now? Because I'm like, I no longer have that book.
That's impact. That's high impact.
It's impact.
If the book was excellent and it leaves that high impact, that to me makes it, that might bump it from a 4.5 to a 5, because a lot of books will leave me at that 4.5 stage. But if it left that impact, boom, that would move it up to a 5 for me.
And I'm not that much of an emotional reader, I wouldn't say. Like, I want to watch movies and read books that cause me to cry or like applaud or, you know, those kinds of things. I don't always react that way. I'm typically just kind of reading. But there are the books every once in a while where I stand up and cheer, or where I'm pacing as I read, or where tears well up in my eye. And if something can do that, then it's definitely pushing it in that area. So I would say for me, it's probably about 95% enjoyment level, and then it's 5% writing quality with the prose and the pacing and the style and all of those other things. So a lot of books for me are 4.5 because I enjoyed it a lot, but man, it took, like you mentioned with, I don't know if, with Lies of Locke Lamore, it took 100 pages or 200 pages or, you know, something to get there. Then for me, I'm like, okay, I really enjoyed this book, but I see that it's got a few flaws here and there.
Absolutely. And that for me is actually one of the things that doesn't mesh so well with me when we're talking about reviewing, because or rating books, because there's two different ratings for book, in my opinion. I'd love to be able to give every book two different ratings, what it was for me and what I think it will be for the masses, because I can totally respect that The Lies of Locke Lamora will be a 5-star book for almost nobody. I don't think there'd be, that's not true, that's probably an exaggeration, but I think there's a lot of people who would read that and be like, yeah, that was a really fun book, but there were a lot of things I didn't love. And that is true. But for me, that was a 5-star, like you were talking about for yourself, the enjoyment factor. My enjoyment factor in the last 450 pages of that book was absolutely 5-star the whole way through it. But the first part was definitely a bit of a problem for me. But I can look past that because of how much fun I had reading it. So it's an interesting one. I'd love to be able to read, rate, and review books based on what it did for me, and then give a separate one where it's like, this is what I think for everybody else, what I think everyone else will think. Because, for example, if I read Thomas the Tank Engine, you know, I don't know if you guys did you guys have Thomas the Tank Engine?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So Thomas the Tank Engine, if I read the books now, I'd be like, 2-star. Like, why am I going to enjoy that book? But that's a 5-star book because every kid is going to love it. Do you understand what I mean? Like, yeah, it's not written for me, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't give it the props it deserves. You know, a great example is Legendborn. It's a book that went all around TikTok, and 5-star here, 5-star there. I read it and it was probably a 3-star book for me. But it wasn't written for me. It was written for a younger audience that enjoys YA fantasy. And that isn't me. So it felt unfair giving it a 3-star, which is why when I did my TikTok review, I still mentioned that it wasn't quite for me. But I also said, this is going to tick a lot of boxes for everyone else. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel the same way. I try to merge the two a little bit in the sense of like, there's another very popular series right now. I don't remember which one is the first one. Jade Legacy, Jade Empire, Jade something. It's in that Jade series. I don't know if you've read it.
Right here. Jade
You've got
City,
it right
Jade
with
War.
you? Look at you. Jade City is the first one. There we go. So I read it and I could tell that this is really, really good, but it is so political. It's not enough action and the magic is not enough for me. So I'm like, man, this is going to be some people's favorite 5-star, but I bring it down. And so where I probably enjoyment level landed more around a 3.5, I probably bumped it up a half point because of, I know that this is quality. It's not just for me. So I try to blend the two a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard balance. What I am sort of leaning towards these days, especially because people are starting to see my videos. I mean, my YouTube channel has grown by like maybe 150, maybe 130 subscribers in the last 10 days or so. So it's really taken off. My TikTok doubled over a week when I posted that video. So I'm starting to get a lot more viewers. And I think that the way that I'm looking at it now is a little bit different to how I was even just a month ago. I think that people want to know my opinion, because they are watching my videos thinking, oh, okay, I like some of the same books as Daniel. I wonder what he thinks of this book. And if I rate it 4 stars, but enjoyed it 3 stars, but I wanted to bump it up a little bit because I know other people enjoy it, I think that's actually doing a disservice for the people who are watching my videos. I want them to be able to go onto my page and my Goodreads and find me and and know exactly what I thought of the book, regardless of what I think everyone else will think. Because if you enjoy what I enjoy, then you want to know exactly where I rank a certain book so that you know, okay, that's a 4-star for Dan. I'll probably like it because I like 12 other books that he loves. That's a 2-star. That's probably not going to be for me.
Yeah. So, okay, so you mentioned a few different stars in there. We both, it sounds like, work off the 5-star rating system. I do it because of
Yeah.
Goodreads. Do you do it?
That's the
Goodreads
only
too?
reason, yeah. I'd love to
Yeah.
rate things 10 because for me,
Same.
a 4 is not an 8 out of 10. I would love to rate it more like an
Right.
8.5 out of 10. And there's, or probably even a 9, 9.5. There's no way to rate something 9.5 when 4 stars is your next option. And I think Goodreads, unless I've only been using it for a little while, I think you can only do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that correct?
Yeah, you only have those 5 ratings. I
That is not enough.
I and a lot of other reviewers on there will, you can only give the stars, but then in my review, I'll put, if I give it 4.5 or 3.5, like I'll add that on at the top of my review so someone can know. But then it's like,
Yeah,
okay, then
clever.
if it's 4.5, do you rate it as a 4-star or a 5-star on the actual system?
4-star for me, but it's a
Me too.
great point. It's a great point. So that goes back to what you were talking about earlier when you were asking me. For me, 5-star is particular. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not just dishing those out because I really enjoyed the book. For me, it's like, that's a 5-star book. That was impactful. That was meaningful. That I think that if a book can stir up emotions in you, especially, or make you laugh out loud, that's so rare for me. So if you can reach that height, that's 5-star. And if you don't reach it, and I think it's 4.5, I'm going to give it the 4. And I think it's really clever what you do. I think that's a great idea to put 4.5 stars and then go into your review, but click physically 4 stars. That way people know 4-star. They know that you're thinking, is it 4 or 5? It's 4.5. Here's why. I think that's really clever of you.
Speaking of the 4.5, for me, that's not a bad rating at
Oh,
all.
yeah.
In fact, I have a tag on Goodreads if a book is among my favorite, and I've only got maybe 30 books there in my favorite category, those are going to be a mixture of 5 stars, 4.5 stars, and even some 4 stars that are in my favorites. And so if I give something 4 stars, I know that author, that particular one, thought that was a very bad thing to do. But if I'm giving a book 4 stars, I'm saying, man, this is a really good book. And for some people, it might be your favorite. For me, it might or might not, but I still felt it was a really good book. It had some flaws, and some people might not like it, but this is kind of where I enjoyed it. So for you, what is a 4? What is a 4.5 that kicks it out of your very exclusive 5-star section, but is it still a really good read for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Pretty close to exactly what you said. A 4.5 is like, this book ticked almost every single box for me. It just didn't reach that very, very, very top height that I do hold fairly exclusively. I don't know if that'll change as we go, but at the moment, I want to hold on to those 5 stars because I just think that it gives more weight to it. And it means if someone goes onto my channel and sees that's a 5-star book, they're like, he loved that book. Maybe I will too. But a 4-star book for me is still a brilliant book. It's a book I'm recommending to almost everybody. And I tend to go of the opinion that if I rate something, I expect other people that know that they have a similar taste to me, they'll probably be plus minus half a star or maybe a full star. So if a book is 4-star for me, there's every chance, like you said just a moment ago, it's probably going to be, or there's every chance it's going to be a 5-star read or a 4-star read. Or a 3-star read, or maybe 4.5, 3.5. So the answer is, yeah, a 4-star book is still an absolute beauty. That's a book that I'm recommending to just about everybody.
Yeah. Okay, so I would love to know a book or two that you've given that 4.5 star. I'll tell you one of mine. We both just read it. It just came out as of this recording like a couple days ago. We both got, I think, an early access of it, and I'd love to know where you landed with it. We talked about it briefly before we hit record, but Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. It's the author of The Martian and Artemis. We both just read that. I finished it today about a half hour ago. I gave it 4.5 stars. I was really teetering on that 5-star, but I felt like this. So the first half, I was so engaged and enthralled because you've got the mystery of Ryland Grace, our protagonist, trying to remember who he is and what he's doing. And then as he's realizing that, trying to do the initial steps to solve the problem. But the second half, while Andy Weir does this with The Martian and with this book, all of the science stuff, which you seem to really, really enjoy, and I liked the science stuff too, but there is a lot of it here. And in the second half, there's just so much science stuff that's going on, and I just want to get back to
it goes hard.
the story. I want to get back to the story, just say he figured it out, and I'll be fine with that. But Andy's got so much knowledge, and then he's got so many resources that are helping him build out this really factual-esque science that I feel like for me and for others, it will slow the pacing down just a little bit, and some people will be like, no, get me back to the action, get me back to the action. So I gave it 4.5 stars.
Yeah, I can appreciate that as well. I actually felt very similar to you, if not exactly the same. At the moment, it's sitting at about a 4.5-star read because it was almost perfect. It was brilliant. I was laughing out loud, which I don't know if I was talking to you in this video or before we hit record. I don't laugh out loud at books very often at all. In fact, this is one of the only ones ever. And I've read a lot of comedy books over the time, like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a book I actually rated 1 star. There's a topic for another day. I rated that 1 star. It's in my reacting to 5-star reviews of books that I don't like or that I hate. But that's supposed to be very funny. I didn't find that funny. I very rarely laugh out loud. Even books like Kings of the Wild. I'm not sure if you read that one.
Yeah.
That's a really funny book. Wax and Wayne were hilarious. I didn't laugh out loud, but Project Hail Mary, I was laughing. So there were lots of things, and you were talking about the science. The science was heavy. He went hard on the science. But I think, even though I don't have a background in science, and I didn't really understand the scientific terms, I don't think I needed to. I think that it was written so brilliantly that I knew exactly what was going on. I knew his thought process, Ryland Grace. I knew what he was trying to work out in his mind. I knew how he was approaching and tackling the problem. I understood the experiments he was doing and why he was doing them. So I really loved it. But having said that, I'll agree with you. It was probably too much. The first maybe 1/2 of the book, give or take, maybe 1/3 was just pure ecstasy. I wanted to know what was going on and why. And then he started going into more and more science. And I think that our characters just ran into so many problems. And I think it was probably 1 or 2, maybe even 2 or 3 too many. And it made it feel a little bit overwhelming. And like you were saying, you wanted it to go back to the story. And I think it just took a little bit too long to do it. So 4.5 star for me as well is probably where I'm sitting at the moment. But I imagine a lot of people are going to find this to be a 5-star read. And there'll probably be a lot of 4.5s as well.
Are there any other books that come to mind for you that just made it right outside of your 5-star rating? Because I kind of want to get into your mind there about like, okay, so it was almost perfect, but it wasn't. And here's why.
Yeah, I'd have to look around my shelf, to be honest. Here's a good one right here. So the Broken Earth trilogy, I've read the first book, which is the 5th season. That was a brilliant book. It's going to appeal to a lot of people, and I think most people are going to really enjoy it. If you can handle some of the really heavy themes, and there are trigger warnings left, right, and center, if I assume that you can handle that, this is going to be a 5-star book for a lot of people. For me, it was a 4.5, because while it was brilliant, it just didn't, I'm not thinking about it months later or weeks later now. I'm not recommending it to everyone. It's not right at the top of the list of what I'd recommend. If you're going to call me and say, Dan, give me 3 books, it's not going to make the top 3. Same with the second book in the Poppy War. While that's still at the moment sitting at a 5-star series for me, I've only read the first 2 books. The Dragon Republic, the second book, that didn't quite reach that height for me. Same with Dune Messiah, which is the first book was a 5-star book. That's my favorite book ever. Second book was very different, took some weird turns. Still an excellent book for me. I really, really enjoyed it, but it bumped it down to 4.5 or 4. And I think a lot of people probably have it considerably lower than that because it did take some interesting and different turns. Same with Kings of the Wild. I think a lot of people are going to find that to be a 5-star book, and I would recommend it to a lot of people, but it didn't reach the absolute height. And I didn't think the follow-up, I think it's Bloody Rose, didn't quite reach the same height for me as well. So those are just a few there that didn't quite reach, but I wouldn't be surprised if other people did find that to be a 5-star read.
And like I mentioned, 4.5 can fall among my favorites. So it's some of the best books I've read. Honestly, a lot of the books that you just mentioned, either Kings of the Wild or Bloody Rose, I enjoyed both of them, but one, if not both of them, are 4.5 or even 4 for me. I think that it was great, tons of fun. I could see why people would love it, but for people that haven't played are role-playing video games, or people that haven't played Dungeons and Dragons, they're going to be so lost even if they know fantasy.
Yeah, it's got a very unique, a very, not unique, very specific feel to it, doesn't it? The atmosphere in that book and the vibe is definitely very, very niche. But while you say that, I do actually think it has a broader appeal because it is not to be taken seriously. It's a light-hearted book. There's a lot of funny things in there. There's a lot of wit and humor. There's also, like, Moog is one of my favorite characters, you know?
So good, the wizard.
On the classic wizard. Yeah, he's a really fun, quirky spin on that. He's a bit of a goofball. He's a bit of an idiot. He makes mistakes. He's all over the place. So I think there are things for a lot of people to grab onto. But I do agree with you. It's quite niche in its feel. I think Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of stuff it's gonna appeal to that audience a lot more than the average audience.
Right. And so I think we've addressed this, but it sounds like to me, for you to rate a book 5 stars, it doesn't have to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but it doesn't have to be perfect, but maybe it just has to be perfect or near perfect for you. Is that, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty apt. I think that's pretty well spot on. Like I said, if I rate a book 4.5, 4 stars, it's still going to be a 5-star book for people who have a similar taste to me. A lot of people are still going to think that did it all for me. I'm just pretty particular. And I know a lot of people aren't nearly as particular. It sounds like you're not quite as particular as me. We probably have similar amount of 4.5 or 4-star books in proportion to how many books we've read. But for me, I just reserve it for the very tippy top that affect me in a certain way. Whereas I know that a lot of people aren't looking for that extra level. They're very satisfied with a book that I would say is nearly perfect for me. So yeah, I'm extra critical on the 5-star reads, but I'll give out 4.5 and 4-star reads because I've read a lot of books that are just brilliant, like phenomenal, and probably deserve to be 5-star reads. They just didn't do every single thing for me, I guess.
Here's the thing. As I've stepped more and more into the book community and have befriended some authors and talked to some authors, and now my reviews are being watched or read by some authors, I'm really giving it more thought than I used to. I just was doing it for fun, but now I'm trying to be
now you're an influencer, mate. People are paying attention to what you have to say. They trust you.
And the people that write it and spent a lot of time, and I've even dabbled with writing some, and would love to be an author to some degree at some point. And I know that in my mind, all of those authors that have released their books, I would imagine that the majority of them see their own books as 5 stars. Like, why would you release or write anything else?
Yeah, and or they tried their hardest and couldn't make it work exactly how they thought. But I imagine if you because authors will spend years, sometimes a decade or more on one book. So yeah, I agree with you. They're putting together what they think is the perfect story that they can articulate.
Yeah. And so when they put their baby out there, and that's a vulnerable thing to do, and other people are like, your baby's not good enough, like, that's got to sting even the most confident, author. And so what do you think our reviews, you've got, I think you may even have tens of thousands of followers on TikTok. What do you think? And some of those, I'm sure, are authors. What do you think that your reviews, particularly your 5-star reviews or otherwise, what do you think that means for authors? Should it mean anything? And if so, what do you think it means?
It's a really great and very, very interesting question. If I was to summarize it before I give you my more detailed thoughts, if I was to make it one thing, I don't care what people's feelings are about their book. Now, that sounds harsher than I mean. I'm not going to bump a book up because I'm going to hurt an author's feelings. I think that would ruin the integrity of my review. If I really, like Brandon Sanderson, as an author, he gives so much to the people. He signs, he does lectures, he puts them for free online. He gives us updates on where he's at. He's got a website dedicated to keeping us in the know. I love that. But if I read a book and it was 4.5 stars, I'm not giving it 5 stars just because Brandon's a really great guy. So while I really respect the authors and I know that their books mean the world to them, I think that what I would say is, for me, like I've been saying through this video, a 4-star book, and I can only give it 4 or 5 on Goodreads, for example, doesn't mean it's not a brilliant book. And I will start doing what you're doing. I think that's a really good point that I'll take from this chat today, is writing their 4.5 stars this was almost perfect for me, something like that, so that people know he didn't give it the 5 stars, but it was pretty damn close. Because then the author will know that they didn't quite hit the tippy top for a really particular reviewer. So I think that in that way, hopefully they can take that from it. And I probably should be a little bit more generous with books that I rate 4 stars. Maybe I can reassess some of the 4.5-star books and give it that 5-star knock. But it would be very important for an author. There's no doubt about it. Like you said, they're putting their baby out there, and that is not an easy thing to do. That is your blood, sweat, and tears. And J.K. Rowling, who's one of the most famous, I would say, of all time, she also said, this was hard for me to do. It got knocked back many times by publishers. It was hard for me to do, hard for me to put my heart on the line. And you can see these characters, she's put everything into them. They are well fleshed out. So yeah, it's such an interesting point. Overall, I'm not going to change the way I review a book based on the feelings of that author. But then again, I'll make it very clear. You will know from my video how I felt about it. So I might say, this was a great book. Everyone's going to love it, blah, 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 4.5 stars. So they'll know, like, this was a good book. I'd like to think that the authors aren't going to walk away thinking that they didn't like my book. There was a 4-star book. Everyone gives away 4 stars. I like to think my reviews are pretty clear. And I also don't always put the star rating in a book. And I didn't for Project Hail Mary as well, especially when I've just read it. I don't necessarily, like I said, I like to be, if it comes back to me and I'm thinking about it weeks, months, years later, I might go back and bump it up to a 5-star. So I don't want to go too hard too early, if that makes sense. So I'll leave my review without a star rating, if that makes sense. Sorry, that was a bit long-winded, but it's a really good point, and it's a topic that matters a lot, actually, because authors, that matters. They're the ones producing the content that I'm reading. It matters,
right? And one of the things that I wish authors and readers alike would understand, you had mentioned it in there, but I want to highlight it. Just because I give something 5 stars or 4 or anything less, that's what it was for me. And every reader is different, and every reader even we're similar in what some of the books that we like. But then, like you even mentioned Poppy War, it's in your 5 and you only have a few there. It's not for me. I don't recall off the top of my head what I gave it, but I don't think I even gave it 4, just because for me, it didn't work. But that's just for me. And so for the authors, authors have to know that what I'm writing is for a particular group of people. More people can enjoy it, but it is particularly for this subset of people, which is going to be a lot smaller always than the mass, group of people that read. It's kind of like, and this is an extreme example, but if I'm writing a mystery story, well, I've got to know that probably fantasy readers, sci-fi readers, young adult readers, romance readers, they're probably not going to love it as much, but that they're not the audience, and so I think readers and authors alike need to know, like for me, if I give a book 3 stars, for me, that could be good. That's not a bad thing. I understand 4 is better and 5 is even better than that, but 3 stars, 3 stars for me means that, hey, for me, it was an enjoyable read. You should look into it. You might love it.
I think that star rating system, while it's good and we need that basis, I don't actually think it covers enough ground, which is why it's great that there's the internet and people like you and me can go on and give our actual fully fleshed out and developed thoughts on why we rated it that way. Because like we said, a 5-star book for me is not, a 5-star book for you is not quite as high as it is for me, potentially. For me, it is brilliant. Like, that is a perfect book for me. Whereas you'd be like, that was pretty perfect, but you'll give it to a book that you're tossing with a 4.5 and a 5. I won't get to that level for a 4.5-star book. Does that make sense to you?
It most certainly makes sense, and I think this whole conversation has been and will continue to be so insightful. And I think it's a conversation that needs to continue to happen, not just between you and me, but between the reading, writing community, because it's going to adapt, it's going to change over time, and it means one thing for one person or group of people, and it can mean a totally different thing for another person.
Nothing wrong with that either. There is nothing wrong with that. This is a subjective hobby. This is something we do for fun. We come from different places. I'm on the other side of the world to you right now, having a live chat. That blows my mind, How could I expect you to feel exactly the same way about something as me? We grew up in different families, different lives, different countries, different everything. So to talk about this it's been a really eye-opening conversation for me, because I love to hear how people interpret and perceive and talk about things that I'm also doing. We have the same hobby. We're reading the same books a lot of the time, but we have different opinions on them. And I love that. Like I said to you earlier, I think it might have been before we clicked record. I like to know what everyone thinks about books. I don't want to just read a book and everyone has the exact same opinion. Imagine if we both thought the same thing about every book we've ever read. How boring would our conversations be? You know, you can follow the same sports team and argue for hours, even though you have the exact same goal in mind. That's what's so fun about reading. You know, it's so subjective and everyone's going to take something really different from it.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can people find you online?
So on TikTok, I think it's Dan's Books. And on YouTube, I'm Daniel Goldman, which is just my name. So follow me anywhere you please.
Well, I'll include all of the links down in the show notes
Beauty.
that anybody can just check that out in the description below. But thank you so much, Daniel, for joining me today for this very important conversation about reviews, ratings, 5-star rating, and reviews. If you're watching this video, then join the conversation by commenting down below. Give us one of the books that you give 5-star reviews and what is one of your criteria for giving it 5 stars. Join the conversation. We'd love to interact with you in the comments down below. And thank you as always for watching and liking this video. If you haven't yet, click subscribe, join the Dragon Army, find Dan's content. It is a lot of fun, and we'll see you in the next one.